Hi there. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. You're listening to Stageworthy, Canada's theater podcast. If you're new here and you're watching on YouTube, make sure to click on the subscribe button, like the video, and hit the little bell so you get notified every time a new episode comes out. That is a great way to make sure that you never miss an episode whenever it drops. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure that you're following, whether that's subscribing or following, depending on the application that you are using. Just go to the podcast in your favorite podcast app, click on the follow button or the subscribe button, and that way, every time a new episode comes out, it will be downloaded directly to your device. I want to talk about the Patreon. I cannot do this show without the patrons who are backing me on Patreon. The patrons of this podcast get early access to podcasts. We'll be discussing upcoming topics, and there will be more as the podcast grows. So if you enjoy this podcast and you want to be a patron and you want to help me make this show, go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. It's only $7 Canadian a month, and I would love to have you there. And with your help, we can grow this podcast, make it bigger, make it better, and help to keep it going. My guest this week is Ethan Persyko, who is the artistic director and founder of Theater You Know. Theater You Know is a multidisciplinary performance artist creation space for bold, experimental, and care-centered storytelling based in Vaughan, Ontario. We have a lot to talk about in this episode. We're going to talk about why Ethan started Theater You Know. We're going to talk about the importance of local theater. We're going to be talking about so many things. So this is my conversation with Ethan Persyko of Theater You Know. Ethan, thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to just start by just jumping into Theater You Know. Tell me about your company.
Yeah, well, theater, that's kind of exactly the little catchphrase that I like to put after everyone's like, "Oh, what's your company?" And it's like, it's in the name, theater. Um, we really wrestle with what theater is in our current time. Like, as you can see, I'm a little bit pausing because just kind of reflecting on all the different avenues and directions where we receive theater from. It's like, well, what's the theater that I want to create, and what's a theater that my community wants to create? Specifically, this theater is located in Vaughan, specifically in Thornhill, Ontario. I'm not providing my address. Ha ha ha! Bad joke. I don't know. But the purpose of it is, it's not that I don't want to compete with Toronto. It's more I want to revitalize the Vaughan arts ecology, which is really inexistent. If I'm being just honest, I technically am the second theatery kind of collective identity in my neighborhood in Thornhill, Ontario, and really Vaughan. There just isn't theater. So I go back to the theater because it's almost, well, no, we don't know, because at least in Vaughan it's kind of inexistent.
I mean, this is the thing, and I think that it is important to have local theater,
Hmm.
right? To have theater that speaks to where you are,
Yeah,
right? And I think because of Vaughan's proximity to Toronto,
correct.
it could be very easy for somebody to say, "Well, there's theater in Toronto. We don't need any here."
Right.
But the theater in Toronto is made in Toronto. Is it for people in Toronto? Yes, kind of, but also what do the people who live in Thornhill, what do the people in Vaughan want from their theater?
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
as far as that goes, what do the people in Vaughan want in their theater?
I I know and I don't, because I'm doing a lot of engagement, community engagement, not even audience engagement, community engagement to see where things even are. I'm really fortunate to be partnering with my local slash childhood library 2 minutes away from my house, which was amazing because it went a day in a day. I went from doing this all in my garage to wow, a library kind of banding forces. And all it really was we were doing a 40-hour play film fest where plays would turn into films. We were in that space because we need some shelter, and the librarians were like, "Clock you, we see you, we appreciate you, and we appreciate what you're doing." Um, and to answer your question, I really think it's a lot of, like, my engagement with the youth and the librarians at that library, and a lot that I'm receiving is, 1, the need for space, which is something that even Toronto theater does wrestle with, just the need for space, and then 2, it is okay to kind of push the norms outside of more conventional theater, that you would see maybe in more like the Mervish, or I was at my first opera show yesterday. You won't see that necessarily in Thornhill or Vaughan, and I don't think the Thornhill or Vaughan community necessarily wants it. I think it's really interested in educational opportunities. I think it's really interested in immersive opportunities. So, for example, we have a stage reading series coming up at the end of now this month because we're in May right now. And It's immersive in a library because we're working with new plays. So, what better way to present these new plays than amongst the books and what have you? So, yeah, I think it's, I don't want to like cop out to like your question. I think it's just really like, one, that like immersion education, but I think it's even just exploring and engaging with what even theater is in a community that doesn't have a robust amount of it.
I mean, we are always in this industry trying to find a balance between what people want,
Yeah.
what they need, what we want to give to them, and you know, trying to find like what. First off, what will get bums in seats? Because let's face it, if you can't get bums in seats, what is the point? But also, what like what are they interested in? What do they
Yeah.
want? And that's, I think, the fundamental question that so many Canadian theaters are struggling with, or if they're not, they should
Mm,
be.
yeah. Or maybe they're not letting you know, and you kind of have to like just dig just a little bit, like a graceful dig to find
Yeah.
those answers.
But I mean, the audience doesn't always tell you exactly what they want, right?
Correct. Correct.
You know, I mean, the way that they'll tell you what they want is what they buy tickets to.
Correct. And then if they end up actually showing up
Yes.
to even just the getting there too.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge, right? And if you think about it, um, you're speaking to and presenting theater for people in Vaughan. If they're going to go to a show at, say, a Mervish theater or
Right.
something, then they have to figure out all of the logistics
Yeah.
of that. Do they live in Toronto? Are they going with their family? How is their family getting from Vaughan to Toronto? Where are they going to have dinner? How are they getting home after the show? How late is this night going to be?
Yeah.
These are all questions. But if they're in Vaughan and if the show's in Vaughan, that makes a little more sense for them.
Yep. And I think that's something that we are exploring. We just got our TAPA membership, which is really, really lovely.
Nice.
And with that Toronto Alliance of the Performing Arts, that's that acronym, TAPA membership, we're really finding that line of like, can we like scoot over to like potentially York University territory as like a nice healthy medium between Toronto and Vaughan, or like kind of, find that like middle ground, because we do have a lot of Toronto artists that are coming into Vaughan to offering that, like, not only, like, educational, but, like, very much, like, we are doing plays, we are doing adaptations of Uncle Vanya by Chekhov, for example. Like, we are doing these well-known plays, but we're just navigating of, like, how do we want to present these? And I think as I've created like a general artistic season that's months and then months away and then months away for the next, I'm using all that time to not only develop a directorial vision, but a communal directorial vision. And how can my directorial vision align with what I'm seeing in Vaughan more broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you're doing classic theater, with which
Yeah.
Chekhov is, the way that you present it to people really does a lot for like how they are going to want to come to it.
Yeah.
I think it's in London. There's this production of Romeo and Juliet
Mhm.
which everybody's going crazy for,
Mm.
or was. I don't know if it's still running, but like
Oh,
people
I know
going
exactly what you're talking
crazy.
about.
yeah, there are people going crazy for this show and it's Shakespeare. And so, like,
Correct.
how do you present it in such a way that both serves the story, but is also super interesting and is not alienating to your audience? Like, if you do the show in pumpkin pants and ruffs, then people are often a little distant from it. But if you find a way to bring it down to them and like to not to bring it down, but like to like bring it to them as if it's a contemporary.
Yeah, and to even have a theme of, like, for Uncle Vanya, I won't get too sociopolitical, but, like, let's just say we're not setting it in Russia. We're setting it somewhere else. And we're not setting it in a home. We're setting it somewhere else, and we're adapting it. So at Theater we're fully committed to new works and adaptations, and adaptations of potential classics. One of the plays that we're doing, Emperor of the New Moon by Afra Ben, which not many people are aware of that play. I'm retitling it Drag Delusion, for example, and we are doing it in the month of October and at the end of October, which is Halloween season. So, the drag metaphorically and figuratively and literally is all coming out. Oh, I see what I did there. And like we're celebrating this like pre-Halloween celebration with like I don't know, I feel like as a queer individual myself, Halloween was a time where, oh, I could play dress up to the world as opposed to, oh, yeah, let me just fancy what's over there in, let's just say, a maternal parental figure's closet, look at it and be like, can't play dress up with that. But now you can because it's theater.
I want to back away from
Mm,
theater, for a bit and talk a little
please.
bit more about you and your theater journey. What how did you become interested in theater?
When people ask you this question, I give them a very, let's just say, different answer than maybe what they're used to. To me, I look at theater as like a safe haven slash sanctuary slash security. And like it did initially come out of a very pressing need of wanting to feel understood. And I remember being in grade 8 and then transitioning to grade 9, going to a brand new school. And I remember walking into the drama room and just my feet would like Tinkerbell sparkle and just rise to the top. And um, I appreciated all the subjects. I actually did very well in a lot of diverse subjects, but it wasn't that like I couldn't go be a molecular biologist or a lawyer or something. There was something about being on stage in theater, and maybe I wasn't the best actor in whatever that means. And I just felt seen, I felt heard, not only by others, but within myself. And I felt like my flamboyancy and my way of creative expression was matched with the theater that we were uh, doing at my little old Buck Thornhill high school, where I make the joke that our prop swords were bent. So that shows the budget for our productions. That's the joke I always give. And then I'll just wrap the journey heading into university, which then was a 5-year journey of I remember going to my interview with, let's just say, prolifics in the Canadian theater ecology and being like, scared in my boots. And but then kind of like like kind of just very nonchalant, being like, yeah, like in high school we did Commedia dell'arte. And they were like, Commedia dell'arte? We didn't do that. We don't do that until like 3rd year of this university. I'm like, whoa, well, my high school drama teacher who was Scottish and came from Scotland and had all this background, it was a very miracle experience to have Miss Clark engage as the drama teacher. And the spiritual gag or joke is no matter if I was in a different doing different subjects or had a different schedule each year, every single year, Miss Clark was my drama teacher for 4 years straight. Even though there were 2 others, I always got Miss Clark. And I think having that like steady mentor in my life It really did something.
I think it is common, and historically, the theater has been a place of home for queer people. It
Yes.
is a place where the people could go, and everybody just is accepting of everybody, and it's a home for people.
Yep.
So theater is that for everyone, I guess, in almost every era of its existence.
I agree completely.
You mentioned, sort of like going to high school for and wanting to get into this, but
Mm,
what was your first exposure to theater? What made you wanna do it?
mm. I gotta go back into the brain archives. Uh-huh. I think something that is kinda concurrent to me also being an educator, and a theater practitioner is being a camper and camp counselor in so with Vaughan there were Vaughan summer camps, and so I think when you asked me that question, that's where the archive goes. I just remember the summer camp was just 2 minutes away. My parents would just plop me on the grass because we all oh my god, we all congregated on the grass and did some, like, you know, very mindful exercises and warmed up, and then we went inside to the building, and I just kinda liked how flowy and flexible and homey it was because it was so just come as you are and, the irony is we will have to cast you in one of our productions in some way because your parents are paying money for you to go to this camp. So by force, you will be casted. And what's really funny is I remember I actually got some like lead role. I was the Nick Jonas in Camp Rock. And I did like the cheese song, and I was like, yes to the cheese and the pizza. And then I think, I forget to be honest, I think I was the prince in Ella Enchanted. I'm like, okay, prince, that's like has a romantic interest and that's interesting to explore. And then what's funny is that when I went to another camp, oh, I was given the narrator for Into the Woods, and I lost it at home because I was so upset because I'm like, I want a character. I don't just want to read stage directions or just be on the corner, which they ended up putting me. I want to be involved in Into the Woods. So I think that's why I've always peripherally been around musical theater ever since then. But, it goes back to those days where literally feeling included just by nature, it's this, like, catch-22 where by nature, like, I don't wanna keep bringing up theater, but, like, by force and by nature, inclusivity is very much a part of our mandate too, so you do get plopped into our little community, and by nature, you should feel included.
Let's talk about that a little bit for you and for theater. What does inclusivity mean to you?
It's incredibly nuanced, Phil. I'm sure you're aware of this. It's incredibly nuanced. And I think what's really important, and I'm sure that folks have expressed this already, is that like even if you are an equity director or an anti-discrimination or anti-oppression officer, um, w- we have to reconcile with the fact that we are not like therapists, even though we might have mental health first aid training, which I do, but we aren't like it's this weird thing with arts, it's a different kind of HRE inclusive equity, and I feel like more and more I don't know where the shift is happening in the Toronto theater landscape, but it's just really important to recognize that, like, while we obviously are reconciling with different perspectives and voices and identities and making sure all of them fit in a really collaborative way, I just find something that gives me a bit of grace is that I didn't go to school necessarily to know everything about how to do human resource to the nth degree in the arts, like, they don't teach that at theater school. I was very fortunate in my university degree, when the pandemic hit, I actually, recoiled from being a drama specialist and became a drama and law double major with a minor in equity studies. And so I do have that background in EDI work, but I'll wrap up in the fear of ranting always. And just, I remember, I was very honored to be part of the Directors Lab North a couple years ago, which is a program that's housed in Tarragon Theatre, and or was not yeah, it's changed a little bit. Um, and Kimberly Rampersad, I believe that's how you say, who is on the artistic staff of the Shaw Festival, came in to speak, and she was like, "I don't like this EDI. What is going on here?" And that really, and I'm paraphrasing, but what she meant and what I reconcile with is if someone is queer or someone is of a marginalized or equity deserving race, for example, and due to the kind of EDI push in theater, to some extent, you're getting this like individuals who represent the identities having to like relearn and like fear of even like re-traumatizing or re-explaining things to them that might be sensitive material. Like for someone like who's my like as a queer person myself, I don't need to be given EDI training necessarily on homophobia and transphobia because those are things that are lived experiences. And I'm not saying that I fully agree or disagree with any sort of perspective. I think as an artistic director and as an artist, I've always learned to just never be so polarized in one perspective. To always have a bit of nuance. But for me, I do agree with what Kimberly, like we're best of friends, Kimberly was saying, in the sense of I feel like it's a tough balance of making sure that yes, we do have structures and resources for support to make sure folks who might not be aware of certain cultural sensitivities get that understanding. But I also think that it should be it should be something that the theater world can recognize of like many individuals, due to their lived experiences, have kind of stepped up and been those EDI directors and EDI people to like advocate and be like, hey, something is wrong here. And that's exactly, I work as an intimacy coordinator for that exact reason. Someone who is like, hey, there's not enough conversations around intimacy work in theater and film. And what's great is now, just due to the nature of where theater is going, I am seeing a lot more intimacy directors and coordinators. Very long tangent. That's exactly, I think, what inclusivity and equity should be. It's like a larger conversation, but all it is just fielding out things, just making sure that you're meeting people at their levels and capacities.
Do you think that DEI, EDI, whatever we want to call it,
Yeah.
can be an ethos for the rehearsal hall without having to state it and just creating a space that embodies diversity, equity, inclusion? And by that, I mean, and I've talked about this before
Mm,
on this podcast about, you know, making the rehearsal hall a place where we understand we're creating this show, but what do you need in a rehearsal process? What do you need? If someone is neurodivergent, if we're doing a rough scene, do we need to build into our day a nap period or a
yeah.
break for them so that they can come back and be at their best for the rest of the rehearsal? Like, how do we build our rehearsal hall so that everybody benefits from their time there and nobody leaves feeling like, oh, if only I had this, I I would have been better in this show, or I would have had a better experience.
Yep. Yep. This is something even an hour ago I was wrestling with in relationship to theater, like it sucks to say this blanket statement, but I want to put on the record like I'm not an expert on XYZ for exactly what I just mentioned, but dare to try or try to try. And what is important to me is I hate to, but also love to make this comparison. Like, if you're making like a smoothie and you want to have the blueberries and the strawberries and the raspberries and the milk and the peanut butter, well, then if that is what you need to make the recipe, don't forget the all that you need in order to make the final product. And that's a larger comparison to if, let's say, someone is neurodivergent, but you do want to cast them in your show, understanding that neurodiversity is not a monolith, and understanding that if you have, let's say, strawberries in your smoothie, don't forget that they do come with the little tiny little things and the grass leaves that you have to, or some people eat them. I actually had an incredible uh, session with Indigenous theater practitioner that many might know, Jill Carter, who's also a professor at the University of Toronto, where she was mentioning how folks in I am forgetting the exact community, but she was saying in relationship to her Indigenous worldview teachings that you eat the bitter with the sweet as well. Uh, that's why when I see people cutting strawberries, I'm like, no, don't. Don't forget those things. And that's I think it. Like in the rehearsal room, do you chop off the grass parts of the strawberry? Do you keep that? And maybe you don't know that you needed those things to experience the bitter and the sweet, and you didn't know. I think literally I was expressing this to one of our playwrights in residence, and I wrestle with this phrase of ignorance is bliss. I don't they said, Ethan, you're too generous. Ignorance is bliss. Well, I'm like, I don't know if ignorance is necessarily bliss. I think I mentioned to them, you could be ignorant to unnecessary stress that you don't need in your life. Sure, I'll be ignorant to that. But in a rehearsal room, don't be ignorant to things that you do need or things that you might need. And this is the really, really, really tricky part with rehearsal rooms and theater. It's the might need and the should need and the could need that I feel like you can't expect many individuals to like, hey, I know exactly what I need in this process because theater is just one big monolith and we're doing the exact same show. We're doing Shakespeare the exact same way every single time. So I'm just a robot that things change as you tour from one place to another. Maybe the location, the space changes. Maybe an accessible washroom in one venue becomes not accessible in another. So it's just as you move from pre-production to rehearsal, show to another venue, just making sure that you don't even forget those little tiny like stem or whatnot or on the strawberry. Just make sure that your smoothie is like the blueberry banana smoothie and it's not turning into a strawberry banana smoothie if you don't want it to. But if you want it to turn into a strawberry smoothie, I like a good strawberry banana smoothie.
Making sure that everybody has what they need, even if they don't know what they need, right? We have to
Yeah.
be flexible. We can't be like, oh, on day one, you said you need this, and now you're asking for this. Now you're being
Correct.
unreasonable.
Yep.
That's not how anything works. We are all, each day we come in and we try to leave our day behind us, like what happened last night, what happened on
Yep.
the way there. Yeah, even yesterday's rehearsal, if it was bad, or if it was rough, we try to leave that behind us. But we come in with all of that stuff.
That's right.
What I need today is not what I needed yesterday, and that's just a fact. One of the things you were saying about not being an expert, and I think that we have a fine there's a fine line to be walked about expertise
Mm-hmm.
in the theater. You can have a director who is too much the expert and they know too much and they're not willing to do anything. My friend Richard Bowen, I worked with many years
Mm.
ago. He's currently the artistic director at Calgary Shakespeare. Um, Calgary Shakespeare Company, and it used to frustrate me all the time when we get into a rehearsal because you'd say, "What do you think of this?" And he'd say, "I don't know. Let's figure it out." And I'd be like, "But you're the director. You're supposed to know." And now I really appreciate that his response was always, "I don't know. Let's figure it out," because that's an opportunity for us to work together and find the truth rather than me being kind of lazy and going, "Tell me what I want to know."
I You're like reading my mind tell about these are conversations I am reconciling with almost every day. I think the one clear topic that comes to my mind is devised theater, if I may bring that up. I think devised theater is something that at least in my community is getting way more attention. It's like, I love devised theater. hold up blah 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 to a pedestal. Let's do more device theater. And when you're like, I don't know, let's figure it together. Um, I see that a lot in device theater, as I learned the other day, DT work. Yeah, it's something that I won't say how I came into device theater, but let's just say when I first came into device theater, I was like you. I was like, okay, but like we only have 3 weeks and like we can't just like have nothing. And it's like, and then the stresses. And then it's like, yes, we collaborated on an idea, but did we want all that stress? Was the stress added into the smoothie recipe that we now are all agreeing with? So what I've noticed as a director, I am an artistic director, but I am directing many of the plays as well. As it stands, all of them. We don't put that on the record, but you can also put that easily on the record. It's just because as a director, my relationship to devise theater is, let's devise things that are necessary to maybe talk about and collaborate on and explore, but let's not devise uncertainty where actors are confused. I think something to really address is the kind of actor's mind. We know we go from Stanislavski or like method acting or whatever to like another side of that spectrum too. And something that I've noticed in theater and film, where I do work in film as well, is sometimes I notice directors taking advantage of actors' openness and an ability to dream up what they dream up, but directors taking advantage of the fact that like, if I just sit back and do nothing and know that I'm not doing anything, and as a result I literally know as the director in my brain I don't have a vision and I'm just pretending like I have a vision, I notice that the actors, because they don't want to come off as or get fired or this, they fill in the gaps for the directors and the producers. And that is something where I think device theater is different. It doesn't maybe reflect that, but that is the device theater or the directing style that I like as a device theater practitioner, where like I'm not leaving the world up to the actors. I'm giving them the tools where they can start building it. You gotta, sorry to bring it up, the blender and the ingredients and the fruit in order to make the smoothie. I can certainly ask, hey, Phil, I forgot the orange. Can you just quickly go to the grocery store and grab me like an orange? But I'm not gonna be like, so here's like $100. You're not only are you gonna buy it for me, guess what? You're gonna pay for it, and I'm not gonna like, and then you're gonna come back and oh, and guess what? You're gonna actually make the smoothie on my behalf. That's where the kind of theater kind of stuff where I'm like, I'm out.
Process is really important in device
Yes,
theater, and
which I
it's not going to
advocate
work
for.
for every type of show.
Yes, yes.
Um, Years ago, I was with a theater company called Keystone Theater. We created plays
Mhm.
in the style of silent film, and part of our ethos was to create these plays in the way that Chaplin or Buster Keaton or any of those other artists
Yeah,
did, which was have an idea and then work it out in rehearsal. Like,
yeah,
here's where we're starting, here's where we're going. And a couple of times we didn't know where we were going, but we all figured it out. But without the directors that we had, they were the ones who were like guiding us to build the scene. Oh,
correct.
if you do this, that actually gets us to here. Cause we were too busy being in this moment, and they were helping us to like get to the next moment that creates the next scene and that sort of thing. And we couldn't have created those shows without the directors that we had.
I think you're bringing up a really incredible conversation that I've reflect on, where it's like we're all trying to get to the other side of the bridge. We're all trying to make theater. Like we're all, hey, we did the marathon. Like, hey, like, and everyone hugs you or gives you a high five. Like, yeah, like we're all trying to finish that marathon. It's just, how are you running that race? And that's different for everyone. That's not a problem. Something that I really have reconciled and also advocate for is finding your clan, community, group, and just moving with that group. I remember in high school we had SAP class, sociology, anthropology, and psychology smashed into one. And my SAP teacher was like, by nature, you're not gonna, like, fully get along like besties with, like, everyone on this planet also because 'cause you're not gonna see and that kind of, like, scares me, I don't know about you, but, like, you're not gonna see many individuals on the other side of the world or what have you. So, the more that we give ourselves, it's just called grace and humility, the more that we give ourselves a little bit of grace and humility to find those directions and work as a team, regardless of how you're finishing that marathon, all theater does require it's a team sport. Sure, you can do solo shows and what have you, but there is more than one person involved in any theater show. Maybe you can someone can prove me wrong, but I think it's not a one person sport, theater.
By its nature, theater isn't a one-person a sport because you need an audience.
That's right.
Even if one person is creating the show, directing themselves, which is not always a great idea, but directing
Designing.
themselves, designing, doing the sound design, doing the lighting design, all of that stuff. In the end, they still need an audience.
Yep, yep, and, very briefly, working with, like, a lot of, new playwrights and playwrights that are working on new plays. I'm not really a playwright, I don't identify as a playwright. Something that I realize with playwrights is it can be an incredibly isolating or lonely, process to write a play for some folks, at least emerging artists that I've been in conversation with. I didn't realize just how writer's block like, I have writer's block, but it's interesting, like, will they take that torch to actually go write the play and go do it in full, and, like, they're navigating so much. I, uh I won't spoil it fully, but let's just say I'm helping a playwright co-write a show for us, and, I was like, because we were on Zoom, and I was like, "Is it weird for me to, like, be on Zoom and bother your kind of one person, like, how you want to do it, and I can turn my camera off or, like, whatever you need," and he was like, "No, no, no, I actually like really bouncing ideas off of you, let's do it together. Maybe you'll go buy a cup of coffee for an hour, come back and whatever, and I'll have something to present to you. And then even if we do the whole thing on Zoom together," the playwright was expressing, "What I like to do is we'll end the Zoom call, and I, as the playwright, will just brush up and do a nice little top down and see it, and then send you that." So it's nice to know that playwriting doesn't have to be so isolating. And I've learned a lot that playwrights who are taking their craft to some serious extent, they like to like show their play to someone, have a read and offer feedback, another person. But when you have like 24-hour challenges or even the Fringe, I think does like a bit of a challenge like that. It does feel, I think, a little isolating, and that doesn't have to have a negative connotation. I've just noticed that it can cause some unnecessary stress for artists.
It is 100%. As a playwright, it is isolating, and that's why
Yeah,
when you get to a certain point, like you finish the first draft, and it's like, all right, well, I need people to read this. We need to get people to read this because I need the connection with other people. I need to hear it out loud. I need actors to embody this play
yeah,
so that I can then hear. Oh no, this is a moment that I missed, or this like these kinds of little tweaks that you can make. You can only get when you've read it out loud or heard it read out loud.
yeah,
The collaboration doesn't even really happen until like the
correct.
draft is done and then you get to edit it, you know? Like dramaturgy is a very important skill. And
Ah,
also it's funny because we have there's I don't know if it's Canadian dramaturgy and then there's British dramaturgy because the British dramaturgy is just like here are all the historical facts that you need to know to do this play, and Canadian dramaturgy is let's beat this play into a shape. I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know what I mean, maybe American dramaturgy is closer to what we do in Canada. I have no experience
because the
with
gag
American
is my
dramaturgy.
early dramaturg days as a dramaturg were doing remote dramaturgical consultation for, American theater companies, actually. So I was
Mm.
like a dramaturg for a company in Maryland remotely, and I don't find it as that incredibly different as a Canadian dramaturgy in the sense that, we do have a dramaturg in the room. We oh, dramaturgs are so important. I'm really glad that you just put that on the record of you mentioned dramaturgy in this
Yeah.
podcast. Love it.
I mean, for me, I think it's the most valuable to the playwright, in the as you're, like, going through the writing, the workshopping, the revision. Like without a dramaturg, how do you like you need that it's so helpful to have that outside eye. They could just sort of say, there's something missing here. I can't tell you what it is, but there's something missing, and it's this moment, and you could talk it out with them, and then the playwright can go and write it. And then in rehearsal, you can have somebody who's like, oh, here we have a moment that we missed, and the playwright they can go back to the playwright and this sort of thing. But it's it's so necessary as a playwright to have somebody filling that role.
I completely agree, and I think for me, the nuance that I have as a director dramaturg, and finding myself operating both of those roles at the same time is I'm just a person who's like, you know what, if I may use your name, like Phil, you are doing fantastic and your podcast is slaying. You're doing so good, and I really appreciate what you're doing. And I mean it from the heart and scene. But like it's not a scene, it's the truth. But what I'm trying to get at is what I've noticed is I think both the playwright and I have appreciated where I kind of come in as a director, but a dramaturg where I'm letting the playwright know you're doing great in developing this new play. It's ambitious to create a new play, and I want to support you. And the gag is there's the kind of more transactional relationship because if you don't feel confident about the thing, how am I going to direct it? So it's not. I don't want them to feel less or more confident. It's not necessarily always about that. I want them to feel confident about their play, but for me as a director dramaturg, I really like not leaving the playwright behind, and that's why as a director, no matter what I'm doing, unless it's Shakespeare and Chekhov, I'd like to invite the playwright into the room, unless it's I might have to go visit a different country in order or a different person related to one of those playwrights.
Mm,
But while I do have my playwrights, frankly, alive and well and healthy, I would love to invite them into the room. I think sometimes I've noticed with like maybe me or directors like in university, they don't like to have the playwright in the room. And sometimes I do wonder if it's a bit of a, not an ego thing, but a little bit of a, I don't know if I'm actually like, and if I'm really reading this play correctly. I don't want that playwright to give me a false kind of, and I'm like, my vision. There's been moments where I've had playwrights in my rehearsal room. I've realized that I wasn't on the pulse of one scene, and I adapted because I don't have that ego that I'm stroking. And so for me, it's really helpful for me that I'm fortunate to have friends that are playwrights and they want to come and work with me. Paying the whole playwrights for all that time, that's a different story. But what I like about theater, you can grab a playwright who's your friend. They want to work with you. They don't want to stop working with you after the play is done. They want to kind of become this like dramaturg or playwright and just sit in on the process. And you just have a friend that's like a buddy that you can just like chat with as you're directing the play.
yeah. I think that sometimes some directors are not comfortable with the playwright in the room because actors will look to the playwright
Oh, fair.
for an explanation or for like motivation or this sort of thing rather than the director. And
Mm,
so sometimes having the playwright in the room
fair enough.
can be a detriment. I don't think it's
Mm,
always right because the playwright should know, but it's so hard because egos. The playwright should know we should talk to the that's talk to the director.
yeah.
And which again is hard
Yeah.
because sometimes the playwright's solution might be, oh, I'll just write that. I'll just write that. Hold on, I'll just write it, which is like not always the best solution because then you write a new thing. And now, do you have to then adjust more of the
I
play
agree.
because you've written this thing? It can be very fraught, and there have to be frank conversations between
Yeah.
the director and the playwright to figure out what is the relationship in the room going to be.
That is so true, and you just, like, put me in my place, Phil. No, you are correct, though, but you are correct because I literally just experienced that. So the playwright I'm working with right now, I worked with them on a new play that they were developing. First time writing theater, oh my god, this person, I won't like, I don't have their consent to but this person, if you can read my eyes and lips, you know who I'm talking this person oh my god, like, needs to be given more attention because I worked with them, at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, um, to help direct their play, and I ran into that, what you're describing. I ran into and I got whoa, I haven't experienced this in a long time. And you're right, what you just said happened to me. But what makes me, in my opinion, a strong artist, not necessarily a good director or a strong person, is being able to have those frank conversations. And we did, and we shed tears throughout the process. This was my first time I cried in a rehearsal. I'm like, "Oh my god, I feel so unprofessional. Everyone's gonna be upset." Like, I'm crying, and the directors are not supposed to no, the directors are supposed to cry, and that's, like, ridiculous. No, but, just being open and honest. We had those frank conversations. We had maybe 1 or 2 rehearsals where, yeah, they were looking over at the playwright, and I'm like, "Back here, bud." But, I don't have an ego where I'm like, if the playwright can answer something, that's great. I think the problem is time is limited. If we only have 1 more rehearsal till we gotta go to tech or dress, and you're reaching out to the playwright or someone for, like, some directing consultation, I'm like, "Well, then I lose my place." So, we were really good with that play in having those frank conversations and structured conversations early on about positions and kind of a D hierarchy, but still keeping, what our roles and responsibilities. And the truth of the matter is that playwright is working with me on the play that I'm working on now. I've never experienced that. I've never experienced someone working with someone back to back because we had such a good process before. And I'd like to attest it to those frank conversations that we had, even with them in the room.
It's so, I mean, when you find people that you can work with, you work with them all the time, right? Like if
Correct.
you, I mean, there can be detriments. Like cliques are a big thing in the theater, and sometimes
Oh,
people complain about the cliques, but they happen because these people have a common language that they've developed over time, and they understand each other's work, and that's just a thing that happens, and it could be odd and awkward sometimes to bring in somebody new who doesn't speak that language, and they sort of have to take the time to work with that, but people work with the same people over and over because they've developed a language and a way to work together, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I completely agree. I'll do a very small anecdote because I just like how you speak and you philosophize so beautifully. So I kind of want to shut myself up. But even though anyway, I digress. What I will say is, like, remember how I told you about that library that I'm now partnering with? It was so funny because I actually not had not really met the librarians, until recently, but then there are people that I've collaborated with, even that, like, co-playwright who I adore so much, but then there was something where, like, day 2 after meeting the librarians and them wanting to, like, partner up, they were communicating, and I was like, "You speak my language. Where have you been all my life? You have" because they're in Thornhill and in Vaughan. And it's this beautiful thing where I am trying really, really hard to, 1, prioritize Vaughan artists, Thornhillian artists, as I would coin it, which are very rare, um, or Toronto or GTA artists that are open to coming to Vaughan and doing community-based theater because they know that they're taking their ego more and more outside of it, and they're coming for a greater purpose. So, what was interesting, again, okay, Ethan, keep it very short because you want Phil to speak more, um, is during general auditions for theater, which were beautiful. Oh, I cried and laughed and everything. What's funny is even though I might have casted more Toronto artists in my season, I have the most level of trust. And I'm not saying that it's a comparison, whatever, but I do have the most level of trust. I feel you. We vibe with the Toronto artists that came into Vaughan for our Vaughan general auditions because the environment that we created and their values were incredibly aligned with what we were doing.
I always think it's important when artists are traveling, when somebody is willing. Listen, Toronto is a place where if I live in the West End, I will not cross Yonge Street, or if I live downtown, I will not cross the Don Valley.
Correct.
So if you can get somebody to come from Toronto to Vaughan, then there's somebody who wants to do the work. And so that's something to be cherished.
We had someone from Kitchener that I was like, "You're my best friend now." I'm like, "What?" And then they tell you after the audition because I don't wanna tell you. before. They tell you after they do a good job at the audition where they're coming from. I'm like, you're already
Yeah.
like top of my list, and now you're
Yeah.
telling me that you came from 2 hours, whatever? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And with that information, I've told myself, Ethan, you better muster up something and you better make it a fun, engaging, good, kind rehearsal process because these people are coming 2 hours to where you are. Granted, because I would go 2 hours to do all these gigs and I'm frankly exhausted. That's the truth. But there's also the Vaughan aspect. There's the, let's just say there's the Grant public facing, and then there's always, self-care and all that great stuff too. But it just goes to show that like begets like and opposites attract, or like begets like, both of them. Your people will come and it's beautiful.
In a lot of ways, I'm thinking a little bit about some of the fringe festivals outside of Toronto in like all over Canada that are really that really appreciate the people who come from out of town. Like even if it's like a tiny fringe festival, like a Charlottetown's Island Fringe, which is very smaller, or the Fundy Fringe in St. John, New Brunswick. These are very small fringe festivals. So when somebody makes the effort from out of town to come there and to bring their show, it's there's a real appreciation for the fact that somebody
Hmm.
traveled, that somebody came there. And a lot of the fringes are just like great places to be for people who travel. So if somebody is coming to your city to perform, they're willing to travel. It's a thing that they want to participate for whatever those reasons are. It's always really great to just sort of welcome them and give them that space.
I agree. I will be very short and sweet and say that um, when I did the Toronto Fringe last year, the shows that I went to go see the most and the people I interacted with the most were actually those that didn't exist. That sorry, didn't exist. You know what I mean? Don't live in Toronto and came from Japan. I was like, oh my god! And like, I still have their email. I could still, pen pal them. There's something just that makes my brain and system like be on this magical overload of excitement when I'm finding someone that's a pen pal from this or that. I just lose my mind because I find that power of arts that it can bring folks from all over the world. We actually, in our playwrights in residency program, we have someone that is going to be uh, having their premiere like in Canada, like a first ever in Toronto, Canada. Get this, Vaughan Thornhill premiere, and they're in the UK, and they're in the
Wow.
UK.
Wow.
And I kid you not, and I don't know why they said this, but I adore that they said this. After our interview, they were like, "I think I found a kindred spirit in you." I'm like, "Oh my god, they're making me cry." But oh my god, someone from UK being your kindred spirit. Now that's a story.
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ethan, as we sort of draw to a close here, um, is there anything that you are working on now that you can talk about that you want everybody to know is in progress that they can maybe see?
I would love to, and I'm pulling up and I do this on my podcast. I'm pulling up the Instagram because, just want to get my stuff correct. We have an Instagram at theater_ya_knowww, like www.com. That's why I did it. Um, that has a lot of information on what we're currently up to. One, at the end of the month, we are commissioning like 6, no, 7 amazing, amazing, amazing new works in a local library in Vaughan that you can come and watch, which is just absolutely incredible. You will actually be able side note, you'll actually be able to watch it through a live stream. So with that, because of the capacity of the library, we can't have a normal theater, but I want to be inclusive of as many people. So the live stream, you pay $5, you get to watch these beautiful stage readings. Come on. That's number one that I have to address. The number two is that even though the deadline passed, we are always calling for producers, production managers, stage managers, and choreographers for our main stage shows that you can also find on the Instagram. The third thing, I promise I'm almost done, Phil. The third thing is that we do have a GoFundMe right now to help support the playwrights and actors of those stage readings even further. We're fortunate to have a little bit of funding, but I'm like, not enough. These artists could use a little bit more. And we actually just we went from 22% yesterday to 42% today of our goal because two of my friends sent an amount on the GoFundMe that I'm upset with them for how it's amazing. And then the last, so there's that, which you can also see on our link tree. The last thing is we just launched an assistants and associates program. The application deadline is May 3rd. This is for individuals interested in admin and management, design and production, direction and producing, performance and devising, and dramaturgy and education. You get the whole shebang. I don't think I missed anything. And really, it's just like it's a volunteer program, but if you want to learn more about theater, I'm already receiving applications from individuals that are just dying to get more involved in theater. So those are like 4 ways that you can get involved. Plus the 5th of we have some main stage shows coming up, like Omkara and all the others up until January of 2026.
Right. That's awesome. Well, Ethan, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate having you I really appreciate you giving me your time this evening. Thanks so much for talking to me about theater,